All right, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Sarah Slayton. I'm the director of the Youth Economic Opportunities Network at Making Sense International. The YEO network is a community of more than 35,000 professionals dedicated to preparing youth to learn, earn, and thrive in a changing world of work. The network's goal is to improve members' ability to design, develop, fund, and implement evidence-based, innovative, and scalable youth economic opportunities programs that improve outcomes for young people globally. Our year-round activities include the annual Global Youth Economic Opportunities Summit, the youtheconomicopportunities.org Learning Hub, and year-round targeted meetings and virtual learning events like this webinar this morning. We want to thank you for joining us along with our co-host IDRC. We are excited to have participants joining us from around the world for today's webinar. We have 107 people registered from 29 countries. Webinar participants, we welcome your questions and contributions throughout the webinar. Please write them in the chat box. This is located on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please also remember to mute your microphone so as not to interrupt the presentation, and that'll help us avoid any background noise during the discussion. We also welcome your tweets and Facebook posts on key points or messages you take away from this morning's discussion using the hashtag YouthEO. To lead our discussion, I'm going to turn it over to Alejandra Vargas, Senior Program Officer at IDRC. Alejandra, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to Making Sense International and the YEO Network for this great invitation to host today's webinar and to take this opportunity to introduce our research program, Vidas Sitiadas, or We Teach Lives. So to set the context for today's webinar, I thought I'd share a few words on what this work is all about and why it matters as it relates to some of the experiences that youth face towards socioeconomic inclusion in violent contexts. So We Teach Lives was created under the recognition that large investments in policy design in Latin America and other regions are based on an assumption, which is that unemployment leads to violence among youth, and therefore employment generation is a way to pull youth out of that violence. Yet there is actually very little evidence that helps support this assumption. What we see in reality in the context that we work is that this story is far more complex. For example, often the stigma of belonging to a violent territory is enough to prevent access to economic opportunities for non-violent youth, which can in turn create a rather vicious cycle. So simply put, there remains insufficient evidence that really outlines in depth what is the relationship between youth, economic opportunities, and violence. And most efforts in research tend to treat those two themes as separate. But what do we mean when we talk about interventions that work best to create economic opportunities? Or what types of violence are we really talking about? When we mean youth, what does that look like? Youth is not a homogeneous group, and we know well from experience that the realities that young men face in violent contexts are vastly different from those that women face. So with all of that in mind, the goal with this program is exactly to promote a shift in this conventional wisdom through evidence, and to use that evidence to inform efforts to hopefully meaningfully and effectively promote the socioeconomic inclusion of youth affected by violence. So today's webinar will hopefully help you learn more about what these efforts are at a macro level, and also in the specific context of the work done by two of our speakers, Guadalupe and Ana, in the region more specifically. So at this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar and pass the mic to them. Our first speaker is Fidel De Roy. He's a social researcher and communications specialist at Flaxo, Costa Rica. With a degree in sociology, Fidel has worked on various academic and scientific projects with a particular focus on creating web and visual data narratives. He is currently part of the team of researchers of the project Strategies for Social Inclusion of Popular Youth in Latin America, Possible Paths to Overcome Violence, which is managed by Flaxo, Costa Rica and funded by IDRC. Our second speaker is Ana Miranda. She's a senior researcher at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council, or CONICET, and a professor at the University of Buenos Aires. She is the leader of Grammar of Youth Longitudinal Research Program in Flaxo, Argentina, and she also runs a postgraduate program on youth in Latin America. And in July 2018, she was elected Deputy President of RT34 of the International Sociology Association. Last but not least, our third speaker will be Guadalupe Leiva Choriego. She gathers 20 years of experience in social and development projects, especially focused on young people with social vulnerability. She is currently working as Research and Development Manager in FUSALMA, which stands for Fundación Salvador del Mundo, with experience in issues related to childhood and youth in El Salvador, and serves as FUSALMA's point of contact with the Inter-American Development Bank Advisory Council of Civil Society, and as a representative of El Salvador in the Right to Education campaign for Latin America and the Caribbean at the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. So without further ado, let's get started. Fidel, please start with our first presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Sarah and Alejandra, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to speak to everybody. And also thanks to the Youth Economic Opportunities Network for organizing this event. It's also a pleasure to present together with my colleagues Ana and Guadalupe, partners of Flaxo Costa Rica and IDRC, along with their organizations, in this regional effort to address the interrelation between youth, labor, and violence in our countries. The Costa Rica headquarters of the Latin American Faculty of Social Sciences, known as Flaxo Costa Rica, and the International Development Research Institute of Canada, IDRC, have built a partnership to support applied research efforts around the interrelationship between youth, violence, and labor since 2013. What originally started as a local and bilateral research project today has been shaped into a regional program that incorporates 9 projects in 7 different countries in Latin America. In this slide, you'll appreciate a map pinpointing our partners in all 7 countries. We call this initiative Vidas Sitiadas in Spanish, or Besieged Lives, in an effort to recognize the intricate reality faced by young people in our countries to overcome the limits imposed by stigma and contextual violence on their futures, but also to make visible several local efforts that intend to creatively overcome these limits. The main objective of our program is to produce rigorous evidence about the labor conditions and economic opportunities faced by young residents in contexts affected with different forms of violence, share this evidence in attractive formats and tools, and also make it reach and inform key actors and spaces involved in program design and policy making. Next slide, please. Therefore, Besieged Lives works on 3 components: academic research, communicational strategies, and policy impact. Our team is coordinated by senior researcher Juan Pablo Pérez Sáenz, leader of the research component. Carla Salazar leads the policy component, and I lead on the communication strategy. Now let me share with you some essential aspects of the knowledge Flaxo Costa Rica has built from its specific research experience in Central America. Can we go to the next slide, please? Specifically, I will talk about the main findings of the interventions carried out in 2016 with young people in 3 areas of Soyapango, that's in San Salvador, capital of El Salvador, and Los Guido in San Jose, which is the capital of Costa Rica. As is known, violence is a phenomenon present all along the Central American region, although its manifestation and impact on the young population vary from one country to another. In the case of El Salvador, gangs, known as maras in Spanish, are those who hold territorial control, imposing limits on those who inhabit them. In the Costa Rican case, the protagonists of violent events are criminal organizations that dispute the control of drug micromarkets. These territorialities, marked by violence, pose several critical factors of articulation between violence and the world of labor for young people. Let's address 3 of them. First, its impact on the mobility of the workforce. This problem becomes more serious in the case of territories controlled by violent gangs due to the sacredness they grant to the territory. This control implies the introduction of invisible borders that require the payment of tolls to go across them. These boundaries limit spatial mobility, particularly towards school and work in the case of young people, thus conditioning labor mobility since the circulation along the territory is limited. A second articulation factor has to do with the stigmatization of the territory and its inhabitants, with special emphasis on their young men. This works as a metonymy that attributes the violent nature of the actor who controls the territory to all its inhabitants, and especially to the young people. The media's treatment of violent events also reaffirms the stigma in the collective imagination, and especially in the business world, which tends to be reluctant to hire young men from these territories. The third articulation factor refers to a relationship of competition between the world of labor and transgressive or criminal activities. Although the majority of young people in these communities are inserted in the labor logic, the transgressive logic based on illegal activities becomes an attractive modality in competition with precarious labor alternatives. For some youngsters, the accumulation of power, prestige, and economic resources found social transgression as a way of life, sometimes breaking with the labor world as a normative option to achieve greater social inclusion. Finally, I want to refer to the limits that these violent contexts imply for self-generated economic opportunities. These limits are much more evident in the case of El Salvador, where extortionary activities by the maras often makes it impossible to succeed with self-entrepreneurship. The request for a rent in exchange for protection, or in the most predatory cases without any benefit, entails strong restrictions for the operation of individual or familiar micro-businesses that quickly become financially unsustainable. Next slide, please. Now, what can be done with all this evidence? What do these reflections imply for reconsidering the orientation of policies and actions conceived to solve these realities? Let's quickly point out some suggestions. First, the main challenge to the states, for the states, is the recovery of the territory. This is a very current challenge in our political context nowadays, marked by a tightening in security policies that, however, do not seem to promise any effective solution to territorial control by violent organizations. Second, the stigma imposed by violent territories must be effectively addressed. It is urgent to convince the Central American business world that not only people should be destigmatized, but also the territories as a whole. My colleague Guadalupe for sure, from SALMA, will offer her perspective on this later on. Thirdly, the battle must also take place in the media to offer an unstigmatized image of the analyzed territories. The digital platform of our program aims to make its contribution in this regard by emphasizing visual communication of results with a positive representation of the communities, not ignoring their problems, but putting the accent on their hopes for the future. Fourth, other self-generated employment alternatives, less vulnerable to extortion phenomena and violent contexts, should be explored. In this sense, the experience of Colectiva Joven in Argentina, to which my colleague Ana will refer next, undoubtedly offers interesting data on the strength of enterprises with a collective social and solidarity logic, which involve young people from the communities and help position them as agents of change. So after all of this, I hope I could clearly convey the contributions of our work in this presentation. Finally, in the last slide, next slide, I just wanted to give you the access info to our platform Vidas Sitiadas, or Visage Lives, which, by the way, we are launching today. As the program evolves, we will be frequently updating the content, and I invite you to visit us at www.vidasitiadas.com, and of course I remain at your disposal in the Q&A period. Thank you very much to everybody for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fidel. I think we'll move at this time with Ana Miranda's presentation. Ana, go.
Hi everyone, my name is Ana Miranda. I'm a sociologist and I use research in Argentina. Maybe you can see my slides in the south when Fidel presented the world strategy. Today I'm going to present a project called Colectiva Joven, or in English, Youth to Collective. Next, please. This proposal was originally presented to the joint call Innovation from Marginalized Youth Economic Inclusion, launched by the Sao Paulo Research Foundation and the Canada's International Development Research Center, IDRC. The project was supported by the consortium integrated by the Federal University of San Carlos, the Organización Acción Educativa from São Paulo, Brazil, the Latin American School of Social Sciences, and the Hogar de Cristo Foundation in Argentina. My presentation focuses on the work being implemented by the team working in Argentina. Next, please. The objective of the project is to develop an evidence-based and scalable initiative to foster economic inclusion of vulnerable youth in São Paulo and Buenos Aires, and enable them to be agents of positive urban transformation. Specifically, we seek to develop an evidence-based increased diagnosis of socioeconomic condition of vulnerable youth and mapping of micro-enterprise, cooperative, and other initiatives implemented by youth organizations as a viable alternative for young people to realize their potential and become agent of positive change in marginalized urban communities. To inform implementation of the pilot called Colectiva Joven, a support center for youth economic opportunities led by local youth organizations. To identify gender-based constraints and pinpoint solutions to ensure that young women benefit from the research and opportunities generated through the project, including revisiting traditional masculinity roles. To support a network of youth associations and enterprise, in collaboration with government and civil society through public-private partnerships. To contribute to policy debate at national and subnational levels and inform efforts to address economic exclusion among the most disadvantaged youth. Next. We start this project from an analytical framework, approaching labor market segmentation and the relevance of the informal sector in the region. In the Argentina case, the informal labor market concentrates in large urban areas, creating great vulnerability among large population groups. Young people living in marginalized neighborhoods face greater social barriers since the neighborhood where they live in and territories affected by water pollution, small garbage dumps, limited access to public services, and little or not state presence. The hypothesis or hypothesis of this research supports the centrality of community action and emphasizes the limits of entrepreneurship understood as an individual action. It also works intersectionality, addressing the factors associated with the violence and gender, with the purpose of contributing to the diagnosis about the causes of the inequality among young women. In this case, we are working a lot with the gender perspective. Next, please. To achieve the project objective, we are following with different strategies that combine both research on hands-on work. The first stage is based on a quality research strategy focused on identifying action and initiatives concerned with the generation of work and income through the inter-peer research methodology. This means that vulnerable young people are involved in the whole process of research. As part of the second stage, next year, we will implement a pilot project. This project will include the creation of a support center for a productivity inclusion of young people and the network of young collective groups, business organizations, government offices, and offices of civil organizations. One of the most important factors is the inclusion of young people as protagonists and drivers of this initiative. They will be acting as peer references, allowing the creation of positive ties and fighting stigmatization, while generating labor and social opportunities. Our objectives include the promotion of youth leadership as part of the consolidation action of civil society. Next, please. We expect the project have impact among organizations that represent young people, the state, and the private sector to develop social and employment-based inclusion strategies. The result of this project will make possibility to assess both of the gap between the offer made by the governmental organizations and the true needs of vulnerable young people, and to analyze the gap between expected results of the public policies and what can effectively be accomplished based on local capacities and community networks. Next. Then, for all of you, I appreciate a lot your attention. You are thank you very much for share this presentation. Hope you found our project interesting, and you are welcome to ask me questions about you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana, for your presentation. And I will move on to Guadalupe. Guadalupe, take it ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Guadalupe Leiva. I am part of the team in Fusalmo that with the IDRC support is implementing the project titled Entrepreneurial Culture and Young People and Violent Context in El Salvador. As part of the broader IDRC support program that Alejandra introduced, this initiative provides a perspective from the viewpoint of private sector employer base on the interaction between young employability and stigma. The project aims to recount the social and labor trajectories of the young men and women taking part in young employment program being implemented by Fusalmo since 2008 to identify the challenge, opportunity, and critical factors define successful economic and labor inclusion. It also aims to address the key drive the entrance to hiring strategies of potential local employers, with a particular focus on how stigma are created, addressed, and overcome by those actors. The objective to design and implement an campaign oriented towards local employers to counter entrepreneurial practice that discriminate and stigmatize young based on the exposure to the violent context. In my presentation, I will share with you an overview of the project that Fusalmo is developing on MAE for lessons. Next. First, the next slide, please. First, let me tell about the success of our program. Secondly, I will share some details about the program and these key elements. Thirdly, I will present some findings on the obstacles that the young people face when they apply to a job. And finally, I will share two visions of businessmen regarding the issue of employment. And the next slide 2 and 3, you can see the success of our program. The FUSALMO Young Employment Program is called Young People Creating a Future, a program with more than 8 years of operation and with more than about 500 young employment placements, like a call center sales agent, restaurant customer service representative, call center customer service representative, cashier, among others. The offer is for young people in low economic conditions and living in areas of violence. We have a document program whose methodology is flexible both of the added demand by businessmen and to create training conditions accessible to the young people who are not studying or working for many economic reasons, violence, family responsibility, among others. We have evidence of more than 500 young people being hired by enterprises. Well, it's true that not everyone has managed to reign over the years. The first job has provided to be important first experience. It has allowed young to have more productive livelihoods, continue their students, get a better job, both for the business. As the site shows through the job testimonies. The research we are conducting with IDRC will allow to dig deeper into the experience of 25 young participating in this program within the project activity support by IDRC. We will do interview and focus groups to learn about the experience with the FUSALMO program and the experience in the jobs. This is a part of the project objectives and explained at the beginning. And in the slide 4 and 5, you can see the key element of work. The FUSALMO Young People Creating Future program has many steps that include training and personal skills, like self-esteem, leadership, interpersonal relations, technical skills, English, and technical skills about English for call center, restaurant service, and sales, job guidance, and job intermediation. A component of 25 hours of training of like skills. This training helps young people strengthen their personal skills and have more self-confidence. The young people are affected by their condition of poverty and violence, which causes them to have low self-esteem. The technical skills have a duration. Excuse me, my microphone. Excuse me, it's a technical. It's all about the technical skill has a duration of 100 hours or more according to the course. And the young people attend for a maximum period of 6 months. Young people are between 18 and 29 years old. Trainers for life skill are FUSALMO staff, and trainers for technical skill are personnel, especially of the project. These services are free or in some cases involve a single fee. Similarly, labor intimidation is free. The emphasis on young people in this program is that they recognize the quality of training. It is demanding, but at the same time they are accompanied to fulfill their commitments. They are permanently monitored in the performance, assist and difficult as the may age. The response to the effective labor demand for Salmo is in permanent contact with the parent companies. They let us know about the labor needs. To work with young people and their deficiencies, emphasis is placed on their personal skills and that they are convinced that they are smart and have the talent to get a job. And finally, the preparation culture. And next, please, the next slide. The next, please. We'll talk about it. The next. Wow, okay. The research that FUSALMO is carrying out together with IDRC will highlight work process, the success and challenge on this program and program future intervention. I will also produce evidence on the realities of young employment for men and women living in context of violence. The companies know the work of FUSALMO. They like the speed of the process when they need an employee. The quality of training, the attitude on the young person with the interview done, among other factors. Companies are satisfied with our job and leave us open doors or the opportunity. Okay. If you want more information on the project, I would be happy to share details during the question period or by mail. Thank you for your time. Finish.
Thank you, Guadalupe. I think we'll go ahead and take some questions now. A reminder to everyone, I guess, to put your questions on the question box as you've been typing already throughout the presentations, and we will take some of these forward. I'll give you a few seconds to type any questions of interest. And just while we do that, also a reminder for people that are not presenting or participants, if you haven't already muted your phone, to try to do that so we can try to hear the responses for our presenters with as good as quality as possible. Thank you. Okay, while more questions trickle in, I'll start reading a few from the group. Kimberly McLean wanted to know, I'm curious about how you've seen the trauma of living in communities affected by violence and how that's affected youth's mindset on pursuing strong economic future for themselves. Are they scared of drawing attention to themselves and becoming targets? So that's one question. Maybe we can start with that. Fidel, you want to start? Talk a bit about the...
Should I continue, Alejandra? So I will, maybe there is a direct question from me about how do you think it's best to approach the media. This is Victor Ordóñez sending it, and what is the approach to the private sector? If you allow me, Alejandra, I will first begin with that one, and then I will be briefly referring to Kimberly's question. Yes, I think what I said in my presentation is the key thing, right? So directly to the media, I think we should do an effort to talk to them with positive and unstigmatized representation of the communities and territories which are marked by violence contexts, right? And this also depends, of course, on the specific characteristics of every local context, right? For example, in our initiative, we are working together with our local partners to identify key media spaces, key media actors, and of course, with each of them, you build a different language, a different approach, because of course, every local context is different, right? And the approach to the private sector, I think maybe Guadalupe can address that question a little bit more. And about living communities affected by violence has mindset about pursuing strong economic features. Are they scared of growing patients themselves and becoming targets? Yes, I think of course everybody is every person that tried to go ahead with a self-employment entrepreneurship in this violent context is of course afraid of extortionary practices by maras and so on, right? And I'll say that quite a bit a hard limit to entrepreneurship, and fear it comes with it, of course. So I don't know. This is not my specialty, the trauma and the dealing with it. But yes, it's. I think it's part of the situation. And I'll say this. I think the trauma of being extortion, but also failing in your entrepreneurship, it's an additional circumstance that maybe obscures the future even more, because not only you are living already in a violent and difficult context, but also you fail in your business, right? In your self-employment business. So I think that's quite a difficult mindset to overcome. But that's what we're trying to address and to try to creatively find solutions to these kind of situations. Right?
Thank you, Fidel. Anna, do you have anything to add both to the question around what's the best way to approach the private sector, but also to talk about maybe what are some of the realities of trauma and concern that youth people face in trying to seek economic opportunities in violent territories in your experience?
Yes, of course. Thanks very much for your questions. First of all, our project support the centrality of community action and emphasize the limits of entrepreneurship, understood and individual action. This is one of the most important things in our project, because I can see some question about the entrepreneurship and the role of the private sector, but we emphasize this hypothesis or this idea about the community action, because in this kind of community, people are really, really vulnerable, and we think that the action we has a lot of limits if you emphasize in the just in the individual factor, you know. For instance, the trauma of living in communities affected by the violence and more the community affected by the consume of the substance that make personal addiction and illness, no, you know. This kind of people need to be supported diariely, to be supported all day, and the organization that I share the project support all day the life of these people, like Gustavo too. So I think we have 2 or 3 main objectives. One of them is work about the work in community action. 2 is work in the with the gender perspective. No, you know, some of the questions ask about the soft skill or emotional skill. We think that, for instance, this kind of a skill is too about the gender issues. No, in direction of the construction that reveals the naturality of the social division of work, and then the last one, the last objective is support to people all day, you know, diariely, and share with them in the build of the inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. Guadalupe, do you have anything to add, or do you want me to move on to the next question?
Yes, Sandra. Yes, thank you for the question. In effect, the young people affect the violence in the territories, but I think the opportunity is in two steps. The first of all is training like skills. It's very important that in order to the young convinced that they are smart and have the talent to get a job. This is important because life skills training about the topic self-esteem, leadership, interpersonal relations is important. This is the first step. And the second is a good training. Technical skills. Good training is too very important to the companies, and when you offer for the job people for a job, and you get a training very quality training is very important for the company. But the important for the young people in violence territory context is a training of life skills. This is my point. This is very important for summer program. This is the force. You know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Guadalupe. I want to just say one quick thing to Gloria Santex's point about the private sector and say that I'm happy to send you some information around some of the work that the program supports. We have one example of a project on dual education working with Coparmex, and in that side, I think there's a big effort to work with the private sector to first change mentalities around comfort on, again, not stigmatizing youth. That's the first step, but also a lot of work around making sure that the training to help insert young people into, demand-driven positions, understand some of the realities of violence and trauma that they have experienced. So try to connect those dots because the realities requires an extra level of sensitivity and work in that regard. So some of the steps to consider. Happy to share some information about the approaches taken. Now, I'd like to move on to Jorge Verges' excellent question. And he raised how or if social emotional skills training is being incorporated into the projects, and if so, what results we see in helping young people to deal with violent environments. Fidel, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Alejandra. I was just reading Jorge's question and about to answer more or less in the same way you mentioned Coparmex, right? I know they have almost all the projects I can remember that are included in our initiative. As I can remember, they have a social-emotional component in the training, but I can now clearly remember the case of Coparmex that includes something they call like soft skills, right? Referring to to the training of abilities and strengthening the personal skills, so these people that come from violent contexts can have a kind of better inclusion into the work environment, right? And so yeah, this is a common thing in the programs. Yes, we will be of course very pleased to share more information with you on that. Okay, thank you very much.
Anna, do you want to share some of your experiences on this type of kind of soft skills training that are needed?
Yes, of course. Nowadays, we don't apply the program because we are working in research in this year, but we start with experience with the private sector in the about I don't know, how do you say, Alejandra, el sector textil in English? Is
Style sector.
And we are starting working with one designer who is teaching to young people to work with the clothes and design their own clothes. But in this case, we are working in two things: in socio-emotional skills like communication, self-confidence, and then. But we put our effort in the gender things about the good behavior, the equal thing to women and men, and we incorporate a lot the gender perspective in the socio-emotional skill. We think it's the great work to do in this kind of group with these people.
Thank you, Ana. Guadalupe, do you have anything you want to add to the question around building skills for youth in terms of resilience and social-emotional skills?
Excuse me. You hear me? Do you hear me? Yes. About the social-emotional skills. I think we talk about our partner, the companies and businessmen, and tell us we prefer young people when a good skill life skill than technical skill, because the company training their technical skill, but the personal skill no training the company, and this is the key. The social emotional skill. And what about the result? What the Fusalmo program have about 500 people in my slide. The program of Fusalmo have a 500 job employment placement, and about call center sales agent, restaurant customer service representative, call center customer service representative, cashier, among others. And I think this is the key. Okay? Thank you.
Are there any final? I think we have time for just maybe one more question, if there's any. If not, just to again point people to the Vidas Haitianas website to get a little of a sense of the projects that we have, and we are happy to send any additional information to follow up to this webinar in writing should you want to contact us. Are there any final questions? All right. I'm going to share the mic back with Sarah for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we're sorry about the sound issues. We have a few folks calling in from different locations, so always trying to navigate that. But we appreciate your being part of this conversation and for your questions today. And thank you again to all of our presenters and to IDRC for this great content. In a few moments, you will be directed to a 2-minute survey online. We appreciate your feedback. We're going to continue to create content through the network and do more webinars like this, so we'd love your feedback on topics and what would be most helpful to you. The webinar has been recorded. It will be posted on youtheconomicopportunities.org, and you will receive a link via email. So if you found this webinar useful, please let others know, and we encourage you to promote today's conversation. Thanks again to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Bye.